Hey everyone, my name is Robert Ogie. I'm the pastor of Cutler Bay Worship Center right here in beautiful Cutler Bay, Florida. And welcome to the book of Proverbs on the 18th of June for Proverbs chapter 18. This is a good one. There's a couple verses in here that I really love. One in particular that it's one of my life verses, if I can call it that, whatever. Just one of those verses that really sticks out to me that I always remember and always think about in the back of my mind. But chapter 18, verse 1, let's dig right in this evening. Unfriendly people care only about themselves. They lash out at common sense. I'm going to jump over to the ESV for a second here and read it from there because I like the way it says it. It says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. Whoever isolates himself. I've always said this, one of the biggest problems that we have in life is when we're going through something, and instead of attaching ourselves to our community, especially if you're part of a Christian community, a church, instead of going to our community, we isolate ourselves. It's one of the worst things that we can do because it begins to separate us from the true power of community. And the true power of community is to be able to lift each other up. And so if you're going through something, the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself. And so I like the way that the ESV says that whoever isolates himself is seeking his own desire. And one of the reasons we do isolate ourselves is because we don't want to hear the solution. We want to just kind of sit in our own stuff for a while, feel bad about ourselves, right? Okay, but whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. Verse 2, fools, and jump back over to the New Living Translation, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Doing wrong leads to disgrace, and scandalous behavior brings contempt. Wise words are like deep waters. Wisdom flows from the wise like a bubbling brook. It is not right to acquit the guilty or deny justice to the innocent. And we saw that, I think, in yesterday's chapter or the day before. Same thing, said a little differently. We should be careful that the innocent are not being punished and that the guilty are not being acquitted. That justice is being served in a way that it should be. Verse 6, fools' words get them into constant quarrels. They are asking for a beating. The mouths of fools are their ruin. They trap themselves with their lips. Rumors are dainty morsels that sink deep into one's heart. A lazy person is as bad as someone who destroys things. And I find this interesting, the switch here in verse 10, because we've just gone through 4 verses here that are all talking about what kind of damage fools get themselves into, what kind of road they end up going down that gets them into a lot of trouble, right? Fools' words get them into constant quarrels. The mouths of fools are their ruin. Rumors are dainty morsels. A lazy person is as bad as someone who destroys things. And then verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it, and they are saved. It's like this dramatic shift into verse 10. The name of the Lord is a strong fortress. The godly run to him and they are safe. And he just brought back to a bit of my childhood there. Verse 11, the rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. They imagine it to be a high wall of safety. Now, don't get confused that that having money isn't a safety. There's actually really good safety in having money around, right? But when we put our security into what we have, when we put our security in our bank account, we're missing the real opportunity to find our security in Christ Jesus. And when we find our security in the Lord, there's just something so freeing about that. Because it doesn't matter whether we have or do not have, right? I've said this before. Paul says that he's learned to be content with and without. And if we can come to a place where we are content when we have and when we have not, that's the best place to be. And then whether we have or we don't have is of no consequence. And then the more we have, out of our good hearts, we're able to be more generous to the people around us. Verse 12, haughtiness goes before destruction. Humility precedes honor. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. I like that one. Listen to it in the ESV. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. If one gives an answer before he hears, how many times have you done that? Just be honest with yourself. If I'm honest with myself, if I'm honest with you, I've done that plenty of times where, my wife Kelly will be saying something and she'll be trying to figure the right word to say, and I'll start guessing words, and she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll just sit back and I'll listen. I'll let you gather your thoughts, and then you can tell me what it is you wanted to say instead of me trying to guess at what you're saying, because it's starting to be shameful and foolish for me. Verse 14, the human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? Intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are open for knowledge. Giving a gift can open doors. It gives access to important people. Now, this is a verse I want to stop on for a second as well. In the ESV, it says a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great. And that is good. But remember yesterday that we read about the possibility of a bribe not being a good thing. And so this is the other side of that. This is the other side of it, that our generosity and our gifts can actually open doors for us. But the danger is that if our heart is not right before the Lord, if we're not living a godly life, a righteous life, is it that we're stepping into bribery, and that God detests. And what is the difference between giving a gift to open a door that's called a bribe, or being a gift that opens a door and it's very biblical and good? What is the difference, right? And so it really comes down to the heart. What is our motive? Why are we doing this, right? But giving a gift can open doors, and it gives access to important people. Verse 17, the first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. Flipping a coin can end arguments. It settles disputes between powerful opponents. I should try this next time I'm arguing with someone. Not that I argue with people often, but maybe next time I am, I'll just be like, all right, pull out a coin. We're just going to flip it. Whoever wins for the day, and we're done. I think we could really use that in society right now. Verse 19, an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. This is just some good advice here. Wise words satisfy like a good meal. The right words bring satisfaction. Now here's a verse. This is the verse that I was saying earlier at the beginning. One of my favorite verses. I just love it. It's one of those verses that is always kind of in the back of my mind, always in the back of my head. Verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. That's the ESV, or the New Living Translation. The tongue can bring life or death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Really, what he's saying is the words you speak become a seed that is planted into the ground of your life, and it bears fruit that you have to eat. And that fruit in your life is what is going to satisfy you, whether it's bitter or sweet. So be careful with the words that you speak, because life and death are that close to each other. It's all in the words that you speak. Again, pointing to our heart. If our heart is good, if we're living godly lives, if we're understanding out of what we're hearing in Proverbs, when to talk and when not to talk, when to open our mouths and when not to open our mouths, how to speak and what to say, that we're blessing and not cursing, that we're giving honor and not strife, that all of these things we recognize that the power of the tongue can bring life or death. What we say has so much power. All right, verse 22, the man who finds a wife finds a treasure, and he receives favor from the Lord. And I can give a whoop whoop to that. Verse 23, the poor plead for mercy. The rich answer with insults. There are friends who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. And that, again, is just an encouragement. All of these things that we're reading in Proverbs are encouragements to direct us to be godly people, to be humble people, to be righteous before the Lord. And who wants to be a real friend? I want to be a real friend that sticks closer than a brother, because there are those friends that end up destroying each other. And most of the time it's because we carry issues in our hearts that get in the way of our relationships, right? You see some things that it said in here today. Where was it? An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. Just in this one chapter, you see 3 really key verses talking about the important, or 4 really key verses talking about the importance of relationships and how we interact with each other. Because if an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city, arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. That means it is very important to watch what we say, because life and death are in the power of the tongue, right? It's important for us to recognize that being a friend, being in quotes, friend, not really, we can end up destroying each other with our words. And if we're not careful, we can end up, right? The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? And crushed spirits oftentimes come because the words spoken to us just put us down and crush us and hurt our hearts. So this chapter really gets into relationships, into friendships. There was another one in here that I'm trying to remember, because it was spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish, right? So really key things here that will help us in our relationships. Wisdom that will help you in your friendships and your relationships, because we need to know when to talk, when not to talk, when to listen, what to say, how to say it. Make sure we're speaking out of our heart, not out of our, whatever. You get it. You're getting it. Awesome. Well, have a great night, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 9.